Welcome back to this new inspirational video. Today I wanted to share with you a lecture given by Neville Goddard that was called The 7 Eyes of God. It is actually one of my favorite lectures. I have a couple of them. I indeed like all of them, but there were a few that really stood out to me over the years as I studied them for myself, and this was one of them. I turned them all into a collection, into a book that I have over here on my desk. But regardless, today I'm going to be narrating this one for you, and maybe it'll help you out because it's really fascinating. Now, in this lecture, it started out, Neville's words, in the following way. We must go on to higher and higher levels, for that is the purpose of the teacher. I would like to look tonight into what it is to my mind the greatest book in the world, which is the Bible, and show you a section with which you may not be familiar. It concerns the 7 eyes of God from the visions of Zechariah. He saw a stone with 7 facets, and the voice said, "This is actually the 7 eyes of God that reach over the entire world. For these 7 eyes are really in man, for man is the earth of God. So forget this little planet, and know that man is the true earth in which God is planted. These are the 7 visions of God, 7 increasingly clarifying visions of the Creator. The Bible names them, but you must look for them. The first appears only once in the Bible, in Isaiah 14, Lucifer, the morning star. And it tells how he is fallen and cut down to the ground. This shining being. All races have taught that man has fallen. It is not something that belongs to the Christian or Jewish faith, but all races have held this concept. So the first eye of God is Lucifer, cut down to the ground. The second is Molech, the strange god that demands sacrifices. Man offers up his sons and daughters to appease this being he conceives to be God, but the voice said, "I command them not, neither came it into my mind that they should do this abomination to cause Judah to sin." This eye is in every man who thinks he has angered God and must make sacrifices to appease him. All the wars of the world are an appeasement. The Inquisition with its tortures was an appeasement to God. The wicker baskets in which men were burned alive were an appeasement. They did it all to appease God that he might not be angry. The third eye is Elohim, or gods, gods above and outside of man. The elements he worshipped, the stars and planets he thinks can regulate his life and influence his behavior. He turns to something outside of himself, and it fills him, and he cries that he is forsaken. The fourth is Shaddai, Almighty. In this eye, man seeks security and comfort. These are the governments, the mighty political machines, the rulers that man trusts, and all this fills him too. He then turns to the fifth eye of Pahat, which means to dig a ditch or to snare animals, dig a pit. It does not mean the animals of the forest. No, it is man I bring into my little trap. Much of the world functions like that today. Everywhere in business, especially in the great advertising campaigns. These people rule like tyrants over us. Every paper, every magazine, every TV commercial has another method of trapping us into buying all these things. So many things that we never get them paid for, before we have still others. And then the sixth eye is Jehovah, or I am. Man finally grows out of the snaring process. He does not now have to trap anyone in the world, but only boldly asserts himself. Bold inner persuasion will create the condition that I am persuaded of. That is Jehovah, the sixth eye. The seventh is Jesus, or Jehovah saves, or rescue, where man boldly asserts himself, but his heart is torn for those still asleep, and he sacrifices for the others and gives himself for the whole vast world. Not as the churches teach it, but as the mystic tells you. You will take anyone, no matter who he is or what he has done, for he is only in a state. You do not condemn anyone, but you lift them out of the state, and you do it by identifying the one you would save with the idea that he wants to embody, and to the degree that you are faithful to your vision of that person, he will embody his ideal and become it. That is the eye called Jesus, or the seventh eye. Now there is an eighth eye, only implied in the Bible, and it is veiled. On the 8th day, they circumcise the child and unveil the organ of creation. There is an eye in man, and Blake names it. He says, He did not come. He hid in Albion's forest. Albion is Blake's name for universal man, male or female. This I is hidden in Albion's forest or in the dark convolutions of the brain. There this I is hiding. When you finally begin to exercise your imagination for another and actually enjoy in the revel of others as they become the embodiment of what they desire, and you revel in that far beyond what you would for yourself, that is the eye of Jesus. What begins to be the perfect seeing of the seventh eye of God. Then something steers, and it steers exactly like something trying to get out of an egg. It is something trying to break through Golgotha, and Golgotha is the skull. That is the meaning of the word. But it is held by 5 nails, the 5 senses. The 5 senses confine man to this world, and then he breaks loose from his skull, as the 7th eye is clarified, and the 8th eye sees concrete reality for the first time in his life. And then, once seeing clearly, he never blames anyone. For with this 8th eye he sees the perfect world. This is called circumcision, or the unveiling of the perfect organ, which is man's imagination. On the 8th day he is circumcised. It means that the 8th eye is open. It does not open by the process of time, but only after the clarifying of the 7th eye of Jesus. Then you see that God became man, that man awakening may become God. God contracts himself to this very limit of opacity, so that living in this state may be called the very grave of man, and God enters death's door with them that enter, and lies down in the grave with them in visions of eternity, until they awake. That was written by Blake. Now these are part of the 7 visions. So, if we put them together as Neville said, first you have Lucifer, the fallen one. Second is Moloch, the being that demands sacrifices. They are doing that right now, only they call it nationalism, and they offer up their sons and daughters to Moloch. Though the voice said, I do not command them to do this and cause Judah to fall into sin. Man sickens of it and turns to the 3rd eye or Elohim, but the stars, the planets, do not respond. Then he turns to the 4th eye or Shaddai, Almighty, to the financial and political gods. And then he separates from that and digs his little pit, Pahath, and snares all the people of the world because he can outsmart them. And because of his smartness, he lives very well during this little span from the cradle to the grave, and that is the 5th eye, through which much of the world is seeing today. He sickens of it, and then he finds that I am, or Jehovah, is the only reality, or the 6th eye of God. And I build my world as I want it, and when I sicken of it, I offer myself as a sacrifice for all others and give completely of myself for the good of mankind. And my good fortune then becomes the joy of hearing their good fortune. As it says in Job 42:5, I heard by the hearing of my ear, but now my eye seeth thee. Suddenly something happens within me, and the 8th eye opens, and I am circumcised in mind, not in the flesh. And as that something opens within you, you see the reason for it all, and you see that eternity is, and you can take anyone in this world and pull them out of any state in the world. That is the 8th eye of God. I want to share with you an experience. The true method of knowledge is through experiment. So I invite you to experiment. The true faculty of knowing is the faculty of experiencing. For when you have had the experiences, you no longer care whether anyone else knows it or not. It does not matter. You know it, and you know that you know it. So I'd like to share this with you, this experience. For when you begin to awaken, then you begin to remember. For if Christ is the center, then I can say, return to me the glory that was mine before the world was. I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life I now live, I live by faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. If the center of man is Christ, and he was before the world was, then when I begin to awaken, I only begin to remember. And when that happens, then the world cannot any longer teach you anything. So when man begins to awaken, he does not question the things of this world. He knows they are not true. Psychologists tell us a complete understanding of a dream depends on the knowledge that you are dreaming, and then that wakes you up, for this is the only world they know. They speak of a dream state as being subjective, and a deep dream state as the unconscious, and doubt the worth of it all. But when you open the 8th eye, you will know there are worlds within worlds, and you are heirs to all of them. You can test your experiences and bring anything you want into your world and prove it. Now Neville goes on to say here something very fascinating that in this day and age we could see as lucid dreaming, but it might even be greater than that in his experience, but at least it gives you some insight on what's going on here. He went on to say, "Years ago I felt myself dreaming and I was swimming. I knew it was a dream. I looked up and saw the shore of a primitive island, not the island where I was born, for that is well cultivated and in no way primitive. But this was primitive. I saw it was an island and I knew I was dreaming. And I saw these strange things like cement posts driven down through the water, but they were in a state of decay. They could have been at one time part of a jetty. I could see this peculiar primitive beach and I prolonged the dream, for if you know you are dreaming, you need not wake. Something in me began to tell me, as memory began to return, that if I would take hold of one of these pilings and not let go and awaken, I would awaken there. I felt it and it was solidly real, just as I would feel here, and my hand did not go through it, and I held on to it and made myself awake, and I awoke in that water, on that beach, and then I waded ashore. I was no more asleep in that sphere than I am here in this one. It taught me a lesson, that if I could touch anything in another world, and compel myself to awaken while holding it, I would find it was real. So you do it for your world, a job you want, the home you would occupy, the marriage you want. Sit at the desk at which you would sit, live in the house you want to live in, be married to the sort of person you want to be married to. And if you hold to it in your imagination, then you will make it real in your outer world. The ancients called this capacity the Western Gate and tied it in with the sense of touch. If you can hang on to the things you touch and then awaken, you will find that the thing has become real. We have it in Genesis in the story of Jacob and Esau. Isaac, the father, who was blind, said, "Come close that I may touch you. Come closer." And that state symbolized by Jacob, the supplanter, was made real in place of the state that had seemed so real before, symbolized by Esau. We are told again in Judges 17:19 how the 7 locks were shaved from the head of Samson, and then the Philistines came and gouged out his eyes, and he was eyeless in Gaza, and they made him dance before the crowd. He asked to be taken to the temple and placed where he might touch the 2 middle pillars, and then he pressed and pushed and pulled down the whole thing and slew more Philistines than he had ever slain during his life. All this is symbolic of the capacity to touch. I know, for I have done it. Many a time, finding myself dreaming, I have held onto an object in the dream and found myself awakening in another world. I have also found myself in other aspects of this world. I did it in Barbados when I wished to be seen by my sister, who was 2,000 miles away. But whether it be in this little aspect or in another world, it does not matter, for there are infinite worlds and you are heir to all of them. You can get all you want in this world. You can use the 5th eye or the 4th eye. All those who lead us into battle are using the 2nd and 3rd. Few are using the 6th, and only a tiny fraction use the 7th eye or the eye of Jesus. And not until it is used and you would rather have the good of another than your own good and rejoice for another more than for yourself, have you really opened the 7th eye, and then you are ready for the opening of the 8th. The 7th eye, the eye of Jesus, has nothing to do with a man born 2,000 years ago. It has everything to do with the expanding mind of man. When you exercise the 7th, then something opens. It is the 8th, but until the 7th is fully open, he hides in the forest of Albion. He hides in the dark convolutions of the brain. It may scare you a little at first, the feeling of an electric battery moving in your head. You feel memory come back and you feel it on this side and then on that side. And then you center it and then you see. Something opens and you actually see a world no one else can see. The 7th eye is based purely on faith. Man does not know God will actually redeem him, and he cries, "My God, why hast thou forsaken me?" And then the new world will be seen. Man seeks security and comfort through the 4th eye. These are the dictators, the political machines, etc. They are always going to save the country, save the world, and then they are driven out. But they take $500 million with them. We have seen it in this hemisphere, the very one impoverishing the treasury that man had just called the saviors of their country. They have not reached the 6th eye, or I am. He who has reached that turns to no one. He knows, I am that I will be. I am what I am. You can be that or anything you want, but then you go beyond it and you want nothing for yourself, but only for others. Then he starts giving himself for man, and then when that is completely clarified, the eighth eye opens. Look in your Bible and read the story of the unveiling of the mind of man, but it comes only after the seventh eye is exercised. So I must learn to experience feeling and touching. That is called the Western Gate, and it is closed in man, but he must learn about it. And before I close this eye, he must learn much about the Western Gate, for I was told not to hold back one secret. And having had the experience of holding on to an object and awakening not on my bed at all, I must share it with you. I awake in the world where I am holding the object. I have been shut out many times from this world by holding on to an object in that world and awakening in it, and it was just as real as this. But I came back to this. I had a body here and one there. When I returned here, where was that other body? Have I not many bodies? For I am scattered over all the world. And man, as he begins to awake, collects the scattered portions of himself, and then he finally finds the being that is God. You can love everyone in this world and you will find joy beyond your wildest dreams in doing good for another. When he asks of you, and you, in your imagination, create, and then you have confirmation of it, and then you rejoice as God rejoices. These things have I spoken that my joy may remain in you. For whenever anyone awakes, that is the eye of God. So these are seven stated quite clearly, and the eighth implied. I tell you that you will feel it like a chick in the egg of the skull. Christ is crucified on this cross with 5 nails, the 5 senses. He's literally talking about Christ being crucified on man, on you, on your body, or in your body. It's all symbolic. The same meaning is in the story of the 5 foolish virgins, and then he tears himself free from this cross. Now you catch it on the wing, but I tell you that you will discover all kinds of wonderful things in the awakening of God in man. For God became man, that man may become God. So this wonderful poem that existed only for God is beginning to exist for itself. Sentience begins to appear in the poem, lifting it to higher states, and we become at last creators, one of an infinite society of gods. This eighth eye is misunderstood by the priesthoods of the world, and they circumcise the child. It is the imagination that must be unveiled, and not the physical organ, and it comes only after the perfect clarity of vision through the eye of Jesus. Jesus means Jehovah saves. Not one is lost. He has fallen into a state, but you, through the eye of Jesus, save him. You ask him, what do you want? And see that condition real for him, and then seeing it embody itself, you rejoice that one has been lifted out of the mire. You do it over and over, and then your head becomes alive and you feel electric currents through it, and yet you will know what you should do, just as a chick knows what to do. It pecks its way out, and then the place where the skull grew together after birth becomes awake again, and you see another world. You see the world was perfectly made and every state is perfect, and then you will know that you are awake to play beautifully on this eternal world, to bring out these beautiful combinations made by your Father. If tonight's talk seems different from what you expected, then nothing is more practical than the sixth eye. You can make your world what you want it to be by the sixth eye. In fact, the fifth has done it. You can snare all kinds of people in your little traps. Read the morning papers. Every ad is to snare us into emptying our pockets, and they will be thrilled that they can do it. Every year we find new traps to get what we have. We have new forms of credit. No one dies leaving anything behind anymore. The whole vast advertising thing is a trap. It has become the way of life, the fifth eye. But then comes the sixth and the seventh and then the eighth. And when the eighth opens, you forgive everyone in the world, no matter what he has done. You, as man, have gone through every eye. You have worshipped Elohim and sacrificed to Molech. But when the eighth eye opens, you will know that nothing displeases your Father but unbelief. Sin does not displease him. The priesthoods of the world tell you sin displeases him, but only disbelief displeases him. For they that come to him must believe in him. Anything you can believe is an image of truth. Could you believe that someone in dire need is well taken care of? Then he can become as you see him. But sin does not displease your Father. It means to miss the mark. And he comes to the world to show everyone how not to miss the mark. If I do miss the mark, he makes a greater effort to show me how not to miss marks. In Hebrews 11, those who come to him must believe that he is, and that he is the rewarder of them that seek. So seek him first, and then all things will be added. So these are the 8 eyes in man. The 8th hides in the forest of Albion, or the dark convolutions of the brain. Breathing won't bring it out, or diets or yoga exercises will not do it. It will come out only when, as you look through the 7th eye, which is the vision of Jesus, you see only the good of another and glory in that beyond what is only for yourself. Then you will begin to see through the 8th eye of God. Use the 7th eye consciously and take every person, regardless of color, race or creed, and ask of him only, what do you want? For in him there is neither Greek nor Jew, nor bond nor free. So you take everyone, for he has only fallen into a state, and you single out that individual's request and persuade yourself that he is now the embodiment of the ideal that he wants to embody. And to the degree that you use the 7th eye, will the 8th come out of the forest of Albion. The opening of the 8th eye is actually the second coming of Jesus. For when the 7th becomes perfectly clear, then the 8th will open as if it were released from the tomb, and then you see as God. One cannot be born a Christian. If you're not using the 7th eye, you are not a Christian. If you are the Pope, you are using the 4th eye, and all the priesthoods of the world use the 4th eye. So-called almighty powers all use the 4th eye, but you must use the eye of Jesus. Jesus is the eye of God that sacrifices itself for the whole vast world. He gives himself for every being in the world, seeing for them their ideal, their perfect state. And that was the end of this lecture. It's so fascinating. There's so much information in here that perhaps it didn't really register if this is the first time you hear about it. But that's exactly how it happened for me. I had to go over this a couple of times myself. And every time I do so, it's like more and more becomes clear to my mind, especially how he described these eyes. If we're honest with ourselves, we can recognize a lot of this in our own worlds, in our own behavior. Especially that whole idea of trying to entrap people in our worlds. Well, it might sound a little disturbing, but that's essentially what happens if we don't watch out. For example, we might have a dream of becoming wealthy, but then we then start thinking of how can I get their money? How can I almost scam these people? This happens all over the internet especially. It's so much easier to do so online. You gotta be careful of that people don't scam you, but likewise you also be careful that you don't scam others with what you're doing. And this all part of looking from a certain perspective. You could see all these eyes, not literally like there's multiple eyes inside of your skull. This is all symbolically again. These are talking about certain perceptions that we can have concerning reality. And if we change the perception around, we change our reality around. Our goal here is to change our perception according to the Jesus Christ teachings. If we dare to do so, greater and greater things will unfold for us. Not just in our worlds, but mostly spiritually, inwardly, in the soul. We will learn to look into eternity. We see beyond the physical realm. That is the most precious ability to have, because it saves you. It saves you from so much trouble and struggles that you face as long as you believe you're only a physical human being. So let all of this sink in. Meditate upon it. Think about it. Apply it. Analyze yourself. Do all these wonderful things. And then let the truth set you free. Now, if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing to receive inspirational videos on a regular basis. And with that being said, dear viewer, never forget that we are the dreamers.